Hi Internet. Another day down in the garage. I'm actually still doing some welding on the same parts that I've been showing in the last two episodes, but in this one I wanted to show something a bit different. Getting a bit bored of welding, and I've just sprayed some zinc primer on some bits, so I'm kind of waiting for that to dry before I do anything else. So yeah, I have treated myself and the car to a new set of carbs. I haven't had a chance to tear them down or anything yet, so I thought it was a good chance to go through the bike carbs that I use. They're the exact same bike carbs that I've already got fitted. It's just I suspect one of the carbs on the bank of 4 is beyond my expertise, or lack thereof. So yeah, I'll show you the carbs. Check it out. These are from a YZF 600R Yamaha Thundercat. Yeah, bike carbs been done repeatedly on the Pinto engine. It's covered extensively online. Loads of guys who build kit cars and stuff use the Pinto engine, and a lot of them resort to bike carbs. The first set that I have on my car, I got them for £35 and built my own manifold. It was this. It was awful. I mean, you can see it was leaking, so I ended up kind of covering the whole thing in gunk, trying to chase air leaks and stuff. I've since made another manifold, which is a lot better, looks better. This thing looks like it came from some sort of zombie apocalypse. Yeah, it looks as if it's rotting. So, obviously, 4 carbs make up the whole bank, 1 per cylinder of the engine. And that didn't come on my last set of carbs, but yeah, you can pretty much remove that whole bit there, including this right angle pipe and this one. In terms of how these are actually put together, and the bits that we are interested in, is obviously air goes in through there, and the other thing we need is fuel. Fuel goes in through this right here. The other bit we need is this here. There's 2 little holes there. This is where the throttle cable connects. On a bike there's actually 2 cables, one to open and one to close, so these butterflies can snap closed pretty quick. When they're not kind of under any tension, these open and close, you would think, really quickly. That's not quick enough when it's on the car and it's under the tension of the throttle cable. So what I've done on the car is I've fitted a spring from here to the cylinder head to just add an extra bit of tension and snap the butterflies shut a bit quicker. Alright, let's flip this over just to make a bit more sense. Another thing that the car needs is the choke mechanism, the kind of cold start mechanism, whatever you want to call it, the thing that puts a little more fuel into the engine when it's cold. So similar to the throttle, you kind of have a little hole there. Cable runs through this bit here. That's really loose actually. There's a little screw to tighten that down. So the cable sits in there, well, the kind of sheath of the cable ends there, and the rest of the cable's here. And when you pull the choke knob out, when you pull that knob, cable pulls and this slides and this slides and feeds more fuel into each of the carbs. Another thing which I don't use but I may use in future, which I don't want to remove, this was broken on my current set of carbs. Basically this is a throttle position sensor and TPS. There's a little plug there. You can use this if you've got any sort of engine management stuff set up. Some people use the vacuum feed, some people use this to kind of figure out the load on the engine for engine management stuff. Now I'm getting a torch just to show you inside before I take a certain bit out. You can see, you've got a small opening at the bottom with a kind of a silver needle. You can just see it goes into the little brass hole. Basically, with the vacuum of the engine kind of sucking the air in under different loads, that hole will kind of expand. Right, when you're taking these plastic caps off, keep one hand on the top of it because there is a spring underneath and it'll launch off, not with too much force, but I'll show you. There you go, there's a spring. So that spring sits, don't know if you can see, there's a little kind of cylindrical bit that sticks out in the top of this plastic lid. So that spring comes out. This is rubber diaphragm. Now remember, I've not dismantled these, so I don't know what the state of these is. So try and peel it up gently. Yeah, seems to be coming okay. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, so the rubber is joined to a more solid plastic construction, which is, if you remember looking down into the carb, that bit, and you can see how it slots into here. And what this whole thing does is, as the air kind of airflow increases, this will raise up, effectively making the inner kind of diameter of the carbs wider. So it's not always just like a giant hole just sucking in a shit ton of air. So it starts off smaller, then it expands depending on the load of the engine. And then you have the needle. The needle is tapered. The needle kind of deals with low throttle to mid throttle kind of stuff, I think. That kind of sits in a bit down further in the carb that I showed you before, sits in a little brass fitting. And as that raises up with this whole thing, more fuel starts getting let in. Kind of acts, you know, as like a little restriction. And that's held in place by a little plastic white cap that the spring rests on. And the spring obviously pushes this back down to position. It all kind of slides up and down inside there. I mean, that's my kind of bro science version. Somebody else probably knows exactly how these work, but this is me just kind of figuring out how they work myself. Yeah. So next we have, on the kind of business end of the carbs, the trumpets. I've already taken 2 screws off. There's 2 just like that black one there. So yeah, as you take that off, you see there's a rubber seal. Looks in good condition, doesn't look like it's been pinched anywhere and squashed. Actually looks in better condition than the ones on my current carbs. So yeah, you can see now with the diaphragm and the sliding bit, wherever it's called, removed, you can see all the way straight down to the butterfly. And that little brass thing here, that's where that long needle slides into. So that goes down inside there. And then what you've got on the front here, I know this one, the central one, directly in the middle, is an air correction jet. I think what these do is they pull in more air at different kind of engine loads to stop it getting too rich, help kind of lean it out. On the car, I think what happens is it pulls in too much air and it won't let you rev high enough. I think it just gets too lean. That's what I've kind of read, and that's what I've kind of figured out. So what you do is you block these, they're just the right size for the tiny piece of a matchstick. You can kind of poke it in there, and then once you put your trumpet back on, it's pretty much secure there. What I managed to find for my carbs is a very small brass screw that I managed to kind of thread it into there. So I blocked that off because the main jets in these are 155, which I think is like 1.55 mil. I think that's what it stands for. Anyway, they're 155, whatever the measurement of that is, which seems to be perfect for the 2-litre Pinto engine. A lot of people buy carbs with jets that are much bigger or smaller, and they have to kind of mess around with drilling different kind of sized holes, and you get these kind of really minuscule little drill bits, and or buying loads of different sets of jets. But 155 seems to be roughly in the middle of where most people suggest. So yeah, these carbs seem to be kind of perfect as a starting point for my engine. How they work exactly, I don't know. Just vaguely know, you know. Air goes in, fuel comes up through jets and stuff, which are the fuels in the bowls underneath, goes into the engine, explosions happen. So yeah, next bit inside the float bowl. The reason they call it float bowl is because you've got a float inside, and what they're attached to is there's a kind of a needle in there, which governs the flow of fuel. Then we also have the main jet. So the main jet here is kind of what governs your fuel flow for wide open throttle, pretty much. Down inside there, hold on, let me get a light, whether we can see. Just down inside there is another similar jet. I think that deals with the lower end of the engine load or throttle open kind of scale. So yeah, that's pretty much it on how the carbs are kind of put together. That wasn't overly technical, I know. They're kind of, once you get your head around it, they're kind of straightforward. There's a few bits that I don't understand, like why the vacuum kind of pulls different things up, where the fuel comes in when the choke is pulled out. Exactly how the jets work it's all a bit of magic. Okay, so a little change of scenery in my shed now with the carbs. I'm going to be cleaning up the carbs with copious amounts of carb cleaner. I'm going to try and get it into all of the little jets and stuff. I won't show too much of that because it'll be mainly just dismantling the carbs. I've still only done the one. So fingers crossed the carbs are in good condition. So I couldn't find the same brass screws that I'd used to block the air correction jets. They were kind of like little brass screws that you use, I think they were like from a picture hanging kit or something. Tiny little brass screws, and I've used them on my old carbs, and they blocked up the air correction jet perfectly. Most people use matchsticks, but what I've actually used is I've got this box of rubber O-rings. Now these aren't fuel resistant ones. I thought they were, but I used them on a previous set of carbs and they did not last very long. Yeah, so basically I've chopped up these O-rings and yeah, used them to block the air correction jets on each carb. That one's a bit longer than the rest. So basically I'm hoping that if I ever need to remove those, I can literally just grab it and pull it out. Okay, so I almost forgot to do the bench sync with the feeler gauge. So first thing that we need to do, turn this clockwise, and hopefully, I'm not sure if you can be able to see, if you look at the edges of the butterfly, you'll see the butterfly is actually moving and opening very slightly. So you can see at the bottom edge there and at the top. So take your feeler gauge and you push it into the gap. So what you want is that gap down there being exactly the same as that gap down there. And the way those are adjusted is if you look at this, the link between those two carbs, and you follow underneath here, there is a screw head just in there. You can kind of get to it. Right, this is really awkward with one hand. I'm trying to hold the carbs and the phone. So you can get to it under there. Basically, if you turn that, what will happen is it adjusts the balance between those two carbs. So turn it one way and this one will open up and that will close, and then turn it the other way, that one will open up and that one will close up. So what you use is that screw to try and get these two balanced. What you also do is the exact same thing here. And there's another screw down there which balances these two. And once you've done those two and those two, there is a screw in between all of those. You should see it dead center in the screen there. So that one screw basically balances those two carbs with those two carbs. So that was a pretty vague explanation of bench sinking, but yeah, there's no point in me going over it in too much detail. It's been done much better by some other people on YouTube. So yeah, just have a look for bench sink bike carbs, and yeah, you'll find plenty. Right, the carbs are mostly back together, and there's one thing I forgot to do just before putting these on the cart. Your air fuel ratio. I think I might have mentioned it before. So yeah, what you want to do is you want to turn each of those in with a flathead screwdriver, and try and get a screwdriver that has something that you can recognize the position of how many turns you've got. So one with a handle like this. If you don't have one, paint a little mark or put a little bit of tape or something on your screwdriver so that you can count the amount of turns you're doing. Basically on the end of that screw is a washer, a spring and an O-ring, and then the end of the screw itself goes into like a needle shape, really thin needle, and that just controls your idle air fuel mixture. So that's pretty much stopped there, so you kind of clock that position and you turn it, and then maybe a half, 2.5 people say is good for the bike. Well, I think they say it's good for the bike. I've seen a lot of people basically say that 2.5 turns out is a good place to start. So yeah, get familiar with where those are. So if you're having to adjust your air fuel ratio for your idle, you're going to have to be adjusting these every single time. So you're pretty much doing it blind. You're doing it kind of from underneath. You're kind of having to reach your hands underneath the carbs and adjust those. So I'll go ahead and do all 4 of those. They've been synced, they've been cleaned, and then I can actually get them on the car finally. So there's the old carbs taken off, and over there is the engine without the carbs on. That's pretty difficult to kind of show in this kind of light what's going on here. What we have 2 flanges, 4 pipes and some rubber boots. That's the basic construction. My previous manifold wasn't really designed, I just kind of winged it. This one I actually kind of designed it. Used a little bit of 3D stuff in SketchUp to try and figure out some angles that I needed to place these 4 runners at. So there's 4 pipes. And I used some design software to create a flange, one long piece. I don't know if you can kind of see maybe from above. I'll put some pictures up as well just to show. So this flange is one piece that mimics the face of the cylinder head where the original carbs would bolt onto the motorbike, and then that leads down to a flange that bolts onto the Pinto cylinder head. So yeah, basically I tried to do it with just straight pipes rather than doing a dogleg kind of bend. I wanted just as straight a run as possible into the head, and what I wanted to do is retain the original mounting rubbers for the motorbike to make sure the carbs were nice and secure and they sealed properly, because the issue I was having was the carbs were slipping off the original kind of silicone rubber tubes that held it on in the past. The bonus of these rubber boots, aside from them working much better, is that they have, if I can just show you, these takeoffs here, which using 4 of those I was able to create feed for brake servo, so that comes down here, so that's a vacuum feed for the brake, and also one on the other side which goes to the distributor. Also, I mentioned before that the return spring on the carbs isn't strong enough. So what I have here is a bracket and a spring which attaches to the carb and helps the butterflies to snap shut. And also, from the old fuel pump down there, the mechanical one which I've kept, up to here is one of those Malpassi, I think it's a Malpassi, I can't remember what you call them, Filter King, yeah, that's the one. So that's a filter and fuel pressure regulator all in one. What we also have is this cable which attaches to the choke, and this cable which is for the throttle. So now with everything attached, throttle cable, choke cable, fuel line goes in between these cabs, loops around, goes in there. Cabs are secure using these clips on each of the rubber boots. Vacuum feeds are already connected because they're part of the manifold and not the actual cabs. That's pretty much everything. Battery was charging, so I'm hoping it's fully charged now and I can actually get this thing to fire up. Sorry it's a bit dark. We're now sat in the car. Try the keys. We have lights. We have stuff doing things. So let's make sure it's in neutral. Let's see what we get. Obviously we've not got fuel in the carbs at the moment, so it might take a while. Let's try again. Might be that the battery's not got enough charge. So I figured out what part of the problem might be. I have a fuel leak, absolutely stinks. Coming from this side, I think it's just the pipe going into the, don't know if you can see, there's a kind of a wet looking pipe in there. So yeah, I'm guessing that not a lot of fuel was getting through because we were getting no ignition. So I'm going to try and stop that leaking, I hope, and yeah, try and turn it over again. Just hope I don't run the battery flat. Here we go. We have life! It works! It's alive! Yeah, it works. So, fingers crossed. Well, first, fingers crossed I don't gas myself with the exhaust fumes, and fingers crossed these carbs get rid of all the issues I've been having with the last set of carbs, because I can't be bothered rebuilding carbs again. Yes, I'm gonna go drink beer. So yeah, the carbs were pretty well synced, just from doing the bench sync, to be honest. So yeah, just needed a tiny bit of adjustment, but they're still not running perfect. Yeah, there's still a lot of work to do, but yeah, we'll see. We'll get there. Yeah, it's just annoying because it's just running really similarly to how it was before. Not very smooth on idle, and the air-fuel ratio is right down at the bottom on idle, which is an issue I didn't have in the past, and then the carbs slowly kind of seem to develop an issue. I'm starting to think it may not even be the carbs now, but I've replaced the entire ignition system pretty much. All new spark plugs, the cylinder head is new, camshaft is new, the valves, everything. So yeah, the one thing that wasn't was the carbs, and the problem still seems to be there. So yeah, there it is. That's it for now. See you later.